Hi, my name is Greg Bowen, and I'm Executive Director of Aclt. Of course, we're here to talk about the progress in implementing our 5-year plan in 2020. And of course, I will tell you that for reasons unforeseen, almost nothing happened as expected in 2020. And yet, it turned out to be a great year anyway for ACLT because of you, our members, and supporters. And because of these people, our staff, the people who make things happen. In my presentation, I will talk about 3 things. Number 1, the backstory to ACLT's formation almost 35 years ago. Number 2, our progress with the creation of a regional conservation partnership. And number 3, our progress in the Parkers Creek Heritage Trail project involving 5 eras of human habitation in Parkers Creek. So first, I've worked at ACLT now for 5.5 years, and I'm still in awe of the vision, talent, and commitment of ACLT's founders. By all accounts, this pristine ecosystem should have been developed by now, being just 40 miles from Washington, D.C., and in a county that has experienced rapid growth for several decades. This is a story that needs to be told every now and then. It's a story of appreciation and affection for the land, and it all started this way. 2 scientists, Annie and Flippo Gravett, visit Calvert Cliffs in the 1930s. Eventually, they decide to create a scientist, nature-oriented retreat at the cliffs. How they created it was important. It was built for community, with community trails, community buildings, opportunities for people to connect. Further, the Gravett's love of nature as a sacred sphere of life was respected by all, according to friend Jim Weaver. The Gravett story picks up 50 years later. The community has grown and prospered, but by then both scientists who founded Scientist Cliffs had passed on, and other lands that the family owned next to Scientist Cliffs were up for sale. Citizens pulled together and formed the first community-based land trust in Maryland. They not only preserved that property, they dedicated the lands for public access, stewardship, and scientific pursuit, and resolved to protect 2 whole watersheds for the love of the land. ACLT was created almost 35 years ago. With now 3,200 acres preserved, we will celebrate it on December 4, when the documents were signed. The formation of ACLT was an action on behalf of the common good. According to Robert Reich, the notion of the common good is that we are not in a zero-sum game with the rest of the world. Our common good is inextricably bound in the good of the rest of the planet. The founders talked about protecting wildlands, which in fact they have. The notion of large landscape preservation, which today's speaker Dan Murphy talked about, is to prevent the fragmentation of the Earth's ecosystems, while at the same time costing governments almost nothing in services, saving the government by providing ecosystem services such as stormwater attenuation, nutrient removal, and carbon sequestration, and making money for communities by creating jobs through agriculture, forestry, ecotourism, agritourism, and heritage tourism. Times have changed, but the rivers, the creeks, the forests, the cultural resources are still here. ACLT is acting now to form a Southern Maryland Conservation Alliance to protect our resources while we can, as called for in our 5-year plan. Because it is not good enough to save 2 watersheds for wildlife diversity, for clean water, for local food and fisheries, for the common good. We need to save large landscapes. At ACLT, we have permanently preserved the largest area in Calvert. ACLT has the only important birding area in Calvert. We are sequestering 320,000 metric tons of carbon in our forests, and another 18,000 more per year. Our ecosystem services are valued at $7.3 million per year, according to Maryland Department of Natural Resources. And as good as that is, it is not enough to save the ecosystem and wildlife in southern Maryland. We need to do more, thinking globally and acting locally. There is one more reason that we need to preserve our large landscapes, and that is to protect and understand our cultural history. And to do that, we are researching the 5 eras of human habitation with a grant from the Maryland Heritage Area Authority. I note that Native Americans here had and have similar thoughts about the environment as the Gravitz and the founders of ACLT. The Piscataway Canoe Tribal Confederacy that populated this area before colonization held and hold a special reverence for the natural world, whereby they view themselves as an integral part of nature. In the 2 studies prepared for ACLT, archaeologists found artifacts of their presence all over the Parkers Creek Preserve. When European colonization occurred, the Puritans were among the earliest and most prevalent. They came for religious freedom. Parkers Creek was named after William Parker. You will hear much more about the Puritans and what happened to them in our final report. But back to the notion of the common good. It must include all if it is to work. Our nation was founded on noteworthy principles that have been replicated by many democratic nations. However, the principle of equality was not mentioned in our Constitution because the institution known as slavery could not be negotiated away. Most of our first African Americans who arrived here did not come by choice, but by ball and chain. As recently as 160 years ago, slavery was legal and practiced in southern Maryland. Humans owned humans, and when they ran away, they could be tracked down and returned. The advertisement you see here was a $600 reward for 3 slaves who ran away from a farm in Port Republic. After 240 years, the repercussions of slavery and subsequent unequal treatment are still present. We learned that 7 years later, in 1864, Joseph Wallace joined the Union Army. The 39th U.S. Colored Infantry was involved in many battles, including the siege of Petersburg, Virginia. All told, the 39th lost 280 men. Wallace was wounded in a battle, returned, and was eventually promoted to corporal. After the war, he came to Parkers Creek by choice. He bought 300 acres of land on the north side of Parkers Creek in a growing community of African Americans. We learned that 4 years after that, a school for blacks was built by the Black Port Republic community, with the families themselves having to raise money to hire a teacher, as opposed to the process for white students, where schools were built with county funds and staffed with county funds. Brown United Methodist Church was an essential part of the black community in Parkers Creek in the early 20th century. Gladys Jones went to this church and is now trying to save it as a community place to enable future generations to understand the cultural history of this region. ACLT is working with Ms. Jones to try to make that happen. Until the 1930s, black-owned farms were a major fixture on both sides of Parkers Creek. Black farmers operated 33,000 acres of farms in Calvert, over a third of all farmland in the 1930s. However, by the end of the century, black-owned and operated farms decreased by 98% in Calvert. They were left out of agricultural support programs and were impacted by heir property rules that forced black farms to be sold. Farm fields became pine forests, thus beginning the current era of human occupation, when people like the Gravitts were drawn to the cliffs, the creeks, the forests, and so forth. In a recent proclamation, the ACLT Board of Directors notes that the history of Parker's Creek is inextricably linked to European colonization of the Piscataway Canoe Confederacy tribal lands, to slavery, to the Civil War, and ongoing racist attitudes and practices that limited the economic viability and freedoms of African Americans and other minorities. Telling these stories accurately and with insight is one small part of the type of healing needed in America today, and it is the basis for ACLT's Parker's Creek Heritage Trail project. We're currently in the research phase, but once complete, the Parker's Creek Heritage Trail will share these histories through interpretive panels along our trails. One final word on this project. We are deeply indebted to Carl Fleischauer for the work that he has done on this project, amassing hundreds of hours in original research and cataloging of his work and the work of others. Thank you, Carl. Today is a beautiful day. Spring is coming, as is hope, as we can see a future without the presence of COVID and its impacts in the coming months. ACLT continues to grow in acres and members, as you will see in our subsequent presentations, all for the common good. Thank you for listening.
Good morning. This is the disembodied voice of Cheryl Place, ACLT's treasurer, here to give you a quick and not too boring discussion of the state of the organization's 2020 finances. This first slide is a comparison of ACLT's finances at the end of 2019 and 2020. Unlike what you might suspect, given that during almost all of 2020, ACLT suffered from the strictures of COVID, financially this was a banner year for operating income. Contributions and memorials almost doubled over 2019 amounts, and events income without the annual auction revenues was still a healthy $19,000, all the more outstanding since almost all events were held virtually. Knowing that the organization would not be able to hold its most lucrative fundraising event, the annual auction, ACLT board members and volunteers brainstormed and convinced a coterie of members to put up a dollar-for-dollar match for donors who contributed to the Fall Appeal. In 2020, Fall Appeal donations topped $164,000. Also contributing to 2020 success, year-end expenses were 10% under budget. ACLT's investment accounts, shown under year-end special fund balances, all profited from the strong 2020 stock market. However, the Repair and Replacement Fund did suffer in 2020. Staff required new computers and software, and both the Double Oak office building and the Holly Hill house required new roofs. Although the work was completed on both roofs in 2020, at year-end the invoice for the Double Oak roof had not been paid. Payment of that invoice in 2021 depleted the Repair and Replacement Fund. Currently, a committee of board members is studying how to best replenish the fund. Looking at the pie chart for 2020 revenues, you can see that ACLT's membership and contributions make up slightly over 50% of its income. For many years, ACLT operated on the basis that the endowment, grants, and a combination of membership contributions and program revenue would provide 1/3 each of ACLT's annual operating income. For the last few years, though, as large grant income has declined and contributions have grown, this no longer holds true. The pie chart for 2020 expenses is notable for one thing. It depicts that 80% of ACLT expenditures are for its mission of protecting and preserving land. Only 19 cents out of every dollar are used to cover administrative and fundraising costs. And that concludes my report, short and not too boring.
Hi, I'm Denise Breitberg, chair of the ACLT Science Committee, and I wanted to catch you up on what the Science Committee's been up to this year. I thought I would do that by talking about partnerships that we've formed with research scientists from Chesapeake Biological Lab and the Smithsonian Environmental Research Center, where I used to work. By forming these partnerships, we've been able to work with a broad network of researchers and tap into a wide range of expertise. A lot of times these researchers bring external funding for the work that they are doing, and it generates a huge amount of information that's available to ACLT. We're also really increasing the capacity of CERC staff and volunteers because they're working hand in hand with the researchers, sometimes helping the researchers out, and in other times working independently under the guidance and suggestions of scientists from CBL and CERC. So here are some examples from this past year. Melissa McCormick and Dennis Wiggum from the Smithsonian have been working to develop techniques to revegetate salt marshes after Phragmites eradication. Phragmites is a really serious invasive that Autumn and her crew, along with Dennis and Melissa, have been working on for the last few years. And now that they've eliminated some patches of Phragmites, the question is, how do we regrow native vegetation? Jess Parker, also from the Smithsonian, has worked with Autumn and volunteers to develop the forest diversity survey that they've been doing over the last several years to find out what trees we have and how abundant they are in different parts of our property. He's also been a real help in analyzing the data that are collected. Chris Rao from CBL has been doing research to identify amphibians and reptiles on our property. And Laura Harris, also from CBL, has been doing research to see whether the elevation of our salt marshes can keep up with sea level rise. She also does water quality monitoring in Parkers Creek as part of the county water quality monitoring program. And one of the things I think is really the most exciting that has happened actually just this past week is the deer survey. John Parker from CERC has overseen a deer survey at the Smithsonian land in Edgewater that's really pretty similar to ACLT property. And what he's done is form a partnership with Anne Arundel County Police to do helicopter overflights at night using infrared cameras to actually get an accurate count of the deer herds there. And through Greg Bowen's efforts, as well as advice from John, just this past week, we were able to get Sergeant John Buchanan from the Maryland Natural Resources Police to do those helicopter flights and count our deer. So thank you all and have a great rest of the day.
Hello, I'm Autumn Phillips-Lewis, the ACLT Land Manager, and I am going to briefly cover ACLT's 2020 Stewardship accomplishments on behalf of the Land Management Committee. Despite it being an unprecedented and challenging year, ACLT staff and volunteers were able to maintain many of our land stewardship initiatives over the course of 2020. While the work days looked different, our volunteers worked on their own, away from the crowds, to keep our trails and preserved properties looking unimpacted by the changes brought on by COVID-19. Last winter, we worked with Calvert County Natural Resources Division to install a barn owl nest box and an osprey nesting platform in the marsh surrounding Parkers Creek. We also maintained our ongoing bluebird, wood duck, and prothonotary warbler nest box monitoring programs. In the winter, we also started native wildflowers from seeds that were donated by the Calvert County Master Gardeners. In the summer, we planted these plants in the open meadows at Double Oak. To further augment our pollinator habitat at ACLT, we planted another meadow buffer along the edge of one of the agricultural fields on Holly Hill. The 2020 planting was the second year of a 4-year planting plan to create wildlife habitat and reduce erosion from the fields into the surrounding headwater streams. Also on the Holly Hill property, work got well underway on the construction of the new Holly Hill hiking trail. The new 2-mile trail will feature 2 stream crossings and meander past points of interest such as pine-covered ridges and the 200-year-old barn. The trail will connect the Prince Frederick to Bay Trail to the Griffin Meadow Trail on the Double Oak property. In 2020, ACLT aimed to ramp up production on its Double Oak farm to help support the increased number of food-insecure families in our community due to the COVID-19 pandemic. 1,877 volunteer hours were put in on the farm throughout the year, which resulted in 3,434 pounds of food being donated to the St. John Vianney Food Pantry. A new shed was also built on the farm, and the high tunnel was used more efficiently to extend food production into the winter months. In August, our properties experienced substantial damage from Tropical Storm Isaias. In addition to 22 trees coming down on the trails, substantial bridge and boardwalk systems on the Horse Swamp Trail and the Prince Frederick to Bay Trail were washed downstream and had to be repositioned back to their appropriate locations. Another bridge on the Flint Trail was also upended when multiple large trees fell in that area. Additionally, the pressure of the water moving through the main stem of Parker's Creek caused the cable on the beloved raft to break and sent the raft downstream where it landed upside down, hidden in the marsh where it stayed until it was found weeks later. Retrieving the raft was quite an adventure, but it was returned to its proper location and back in working order within a few weeks. ACLT also hosted its 8th annual Maryland Master Naturalist class, although like most things, these look different than in years past. After starting as usual in March, the class was put on hiatus throughout the spring and summer, while staff transitioned the program to an online format. 16 new Master Naturalists graduated in October. Throughout the year, ACLT's 49 currently active Master Naturalist volunteers donated a total of 3,015 volunteer hours, despite the fact that many of our larger stewardship and in-person outreach events were canceled for the year. ACLT's 35 hunters donated 745 hours to land management projects in 2020 as well. As Denise already mentioned, more progress was made on the ongoing Forest Diversity Survey last year as well. The Master Naturalists were integral to collecting the data from within the 4 new forest plots, which focused on hydraic habitat types. The dedicated Wednesday Woods Worker crew carried on the tradition of meeting every Wednesday morning to complete invasive removal and trail stewardship projects on the south side properties. A few notable projects included the construction of a new boardwalk section on the north-south trail and the extension of the boardwalk on the Flint Trail. Similarly, the Thursday Trail Adventurers crew continued to meet every Thursday morning to complete trail maintenance and invasive removal on the north side properties. These volunteers helped to install the Holly Hill Trail, built corduroy roads on the Parkers Creek Road Trail, and completed many other trail maintenance projects. The TTA crew also spent a great deal of time working to hand pull the highly invasive wavy leaf basket grass that was found within the watershed in 2019. Lastly, I wanted to recognize and thank some key people who made all of these projects possible. ACLT was fortunate to receive 2 Chesapeake Conservation Corps members over the last 2 CCC terms. Rachel and Charlie helped with many of these projects before the conclusion of their program in August. Nicole and Alyssa have been making a significant impact on ACLT since their arrival in August of last year. In addition to our wonderful CCC members, we all know ACLT would not be what it is today without all of our amazing volunteers. We appreciate any time that our volunteers are willing to donate to help us accomplish our mission, and are especially grateful for those who dedicated over 100 hours last year. Those volunteers were Sharon Brewer, Peggy Cook, Kevin Donahue, Kathy Elwood, Bob Estes, Judy Ferris, Bob Field, Carl Fleischhauer, Kathy Fouts, Susan Helmrich, Dale Hutchins, Penny Moran, Pat Morrison, Ginny Murphy, Ken Romney, R.T. West, Chuck Whittington, and Ron Wilson. So thank you to them and to all of our amazing volunteers for all that you helped ACLT accomplish in 2020. We truly could not do it without you.
Hello, my name is Miriam Gohl, and I am the Community Relations Manager for ACLT. I am pleased to present the work of the Outreach and Membership Committee in 2020. First, I'd like to introduce the members of the committee, also known as the O&MC. They did an amazing job of pivoting after the pandemic struck and their hard work resulted in a very successful year. None of what I am about to present would have been possible without the dedication of this lively group of enthusiastic volunteers under the leadership of Penny Moran, chairperson. At the beginning of 2020, ACLT's calendar was packed with numerous events, guided hikes, and canoe trips. When the COVID-19 pandemic struck in March, the ONMC was gearing up for its first big event of the year. It was the 50th anniversary of Earth Day, and several events were planned. The ONMC took advantage of the fact that outdoor exercise was not only still permitted, but was encouraged for the physical and mental health benefits it provides. Because of this, the trails remained open with safety precautions put in place, including mask wearing and social distancing. A touchless way for visitors to sign in using QR codes was introduced. The number of trail visitors skyrocketed, with lots of first-time visitors, resulting in an estimated 68,000 visitors in 2020. The first virtual event held was the Earth Day 5K. Participants were allowed to run, walk, or hike on their own time and in any location. The Earth Day 5K virtual event was so popular, a 22-mile Hit the Trails challenge was introduced, where participants hiked all 22 miles of ACLT trails over the course of a 6-week period. For several of the virtual events, private Facebook groups were created for participants. These groups are very active and have helped build a real sense of community, with hundreds of photos and personal experiences being shared among group members. When it became obvious that the annual Sip and Save beer tasting event would need to be canceled, the ONMC created the Passport to Preservation virtual event. Participants were issued passports, which they took to 9 participating local breweries and wineries, where they could enjoy discounted drinks and get their passports stamped. The event was a win-win-win. The venues benefited by increased visitors. The participants discovered a safe and fun way to escape from being cooped up at home, and ACLT experienced increased exposure while highlighting the importance of supporting local agritourism businesses. The Passport to Preservation event would not have been possible without the cooperation and support of these 9 local breweries and wineries. We appreciate their participation and hope to partner with them again this year. As more became known about the way in which the COVID-19 virus was spread, it was decided that it would be safe to resume the canoe trips that had been planned. 11 trips were conducted with a total of 209 people participating throughout the season. A new outdoor event, ACLT's October Celebration Weekend, was held in lieu of the annual dinner and auction. Since the auction is normally ACLT's biggest fundraiser of the year, the Celebration Weekend was used to launch and promote the Fall Appeal. The 2-day event included informational exhibits depicting ACLT's history and wide variety of programs, as well as family games and a free concert by local musician Longman Joseph Norris. We would like to say a big thank you to the 14 local businesses who sponsored the celebration weekend. Some of the sponsors donated cash, while others donated products and services that were raffled off during the course of the weekend. Thank you. 51 athletes were able to participate in ACLT's immensely popular Parkers Creek Challenge Triathlon, since it is held outdoors with little or no close contact among participants. A virtual biathlon option was also offered. The year would not be complete without ACLT's annual Wreath and Green sale. Because it was not possible to hold the traditional indoor wreath-making workshops, 20 volunteers gathered in the ACLT office parking lot and made over 50 wreaths, which sold out within the first hour of the sale to make this year our most successful yet. The theme for 2020 was apropos, think globally, act locally. The global pandemic certainly brought issues of global concern home to all of us. ACLT had many ideas planned for urging people to act locally. Because of the pandemic, people appreciated their local surroundings more. The ability to explore the 3,200 acres of wildlands that ACLT has to offer was just one. The theme for 2021 is a celebration of ACLT's 35th anniversary, culminating in a celebration event in December. In 2021, the Outreach and Membership Committee will continue connecting with the community to share ACLT's mission to introduce them to the beauty of the Parkers Creek Reserve and to educate them about the importance of preserving the land, wildlife, and waterways. Get in on the fun. Check out our calendar of events on our website and follow us on Facebook and Instagram.
It has been an exciting year for the Land Acquisition Committee. One of the responsibilities of the committee is to maintain a prioritized list of properties that may be of interest to ACLT. Here is the current list of preservation priorities. We want to talk about number 1 on the list, GRDC. This slide shows the location of the GRDC property. It is located to the south of the East Loop Trail and north of our Kenwood properties. The Maryland Department of Natural Resources has conducted a biological survey in this general area. As you can see, the red lines indicate the area that they surveyed. They found it to be a very significant biologically diverse area, well worthy of preservation. The blue lines on the map are the Governor's Run property, the GRDC property. As I walk the boundary of the GRDC property, it becomes very clear how important it is as a connector between existing ACLT properties to the north and the Kenwood property to the south. In summary, GRDC is 80 acres of biologically significant property that connects existing ACLT properties. So let's return to the priority list. Number 1, we've just been talking about GRDC. Number 3 is a 160-acre parcel of land south of Prince Frederick, the Yo property. In the last few months, this property has been put up for sale. This slide shows the relationship of the Yo property to other ACLT properties. Here you can see that the Yo property is located south of Prince Frederick and north of Port Republic. The Yo property is located just south of the Adams Rib restaurant. A closer view shows the Yo property and the associated housing. There are 2 main structures on the property, the house and a large red barn. In walking the border of the property, I had an opportunity to better understand the value of this property. There are nice meadows, several streams, and in places a very strong feeling of remoteness. Several small meadows help to increase the biological diversity on the property. Except for the meadows, land is quite hilly, as is typical of much of the land that ACLT owns. Several streams and wet areas are common in the lowlands. This slide shows that there are 2 major streams originating in the property that drain into the Parkers Creek watershed. This slide shows the conserved properties adjacent to the Yo property. We need to preserve these 2 properties if ACLT is to continue its marvelous record of land preservation. Obviously, additional funding is going to be required, so you can expect over the next few months we will be introducing a fundraising effort to enable us to purchase these properties.
Hi, I'm Robin Truslow, Chair of Admin and Fundraising. I was brand new to this team in 2020 and luckily had great leaders to coach me along the way. This was our team. And if you have a passion for fundraising, please let me know, as we do have a couple of slots to fill for 2021. We had two major accomplishments this year. One was to make improvements to our staff leave policy. Much thanks for these improvements goes to Pat Hoffman, who got an awful lot of HR experience as director of Calvert Library. You can see we added a few days off, increased sick leave, and now allow sick leave to be used to care for a sick family member. Our second accomplishment was that we adapted our fall appeal to be more assertive than usual in order to make up for not holding our most important fundraiser of the year. Our initial goal was to raise $105,000, and we raised over $164,000. That puts ACLT in a strong position coming into 2021. We heard from Mr. Murphy the importance of large landscape preservation and the impact that will have on healthy ecosystems and overall quality of life. We heard how ACLT started 35 years ago with a few unselfish, forward-thinking individuals collaborating for the common good. We've now grown to a membership base of over 700 families committed to the common good. We heard about the scientific work being done by volunteers on our lands, learning for the common good. We have staff and volunteers researching, preserving, and showcasing our cultural history through projects like the 5 Eras of Human Habitation, sharing this history for the common good. We see thousands of hikers every month on our 22 miles of trails, experiencing the common good. Land preservation is what makes all this good happen for our community. And land preservation is made possible with strong financial support from people committed to this common good. Yes, ACLT has an incredible staff committed to seeking grants, engaging volunteers to economize the work we do, developing inspiring events that raise money in addition to connecting people with the land, and advocating for conservation partnerships to leverage our purchasing power. But to preserve land, ultimately, we continue to need donors committed to the common good. Let's take a look. For many individuals, 2020 was a challenging year. ACLT provided respite for those seeking someplace other than their own four walls, seeking exercise, and seeking the mental peace that the natural world can inspire. Our staff and committees parlayed many of those seekers into givers, as you can see in this chart. The first donation to ACLT is often through membership, so you can see that 2020 has given us a lot of potential for future fundraising. Huge thanks to Outreach and Membership Committee for that head start. The jump in membership and donations wasn't just because of 2020, though. Notice that we saw our first significant increase in 2019, not counting a substantial donation in 2012 from a beloved charter member. In 2019, our community really began noticing ACLT and seeing the need for the work we do. You can see also that 7% of general donations and memberships came from new donors. So give yourself a Zoom applause if you were a new donor in 2020. We look forward to getting to know you better and learning what turned you on to ACLT's mission. I'll post my email in chat, and I hope you'll contact me to arrange a conversation. Many of you belong to ACLT's long committed donor base, and on behalf of admin and fundraising, thank you for always stepping up to make a difference when a land preservation need arises. ACLT has a strong history of setting land conservation goals and attaining them with your help. We are continuing to build for the future and the common good. President Dave Farr told you about 2 incredible opportunities this year to grow our conservation landscape. We have changed our world for the better by acting locally. And these 2 properties would add to our wildlife corridor. And if we can preserve them, we save another 238 acres in the Parkers Creek and Governor's Run watersheds. With these exciting opportunities coming up, I am hereby putting you on notice that if all goes according to plan, we will begin a capital campaign this spring to add new gems to our landscape by the end of the year. And I hope every one of you will be excited to participate for the common good. We have made a difference. And by continuing to preserve our watersheds, you are changing the future for the common good. I hope we can count on you for our next 35 years. On behalf of admin and fundraising, thank you.